First impressions are everything. Sometimes, even when mistakes have been corrected, it's too little too late. Therein comes folks like me, bound and determined to give a game you wanted the best for a second chance. With bugs squashed, saves fixed, the whole package nice and shiny. At least you'd hope. Steven Universe Save the Light is a sequel to the mobile RPG Attack the Light. Attack the Light was simplistic but worked very well as a game to pick up and play, and was much more complete than most games you'll play on your phone. Save the Light attempts to expand the concepts further, extending out Steven's allies to more of the show's cast, making the gameplay more similar to a Mario RPG, and giving a much bigger and robust experience. Visually speaking, the game deviates from the show with more simple, albeit consistent, designs for each character. Locations are vivid and keep in tune with the characters, less about tiny texture details and more about creating a colorful world to explore. Small winks, nods, and Easter eggs are all over this game for fans of the show. Some deviate from whole episodes to as small as a single line or joke that struck a chord somewhere along the line. Just about every character you'd want to see makes an appearance in some manner, and getting to explore Beach City with all of its winks and nods to bigger areas that weren't as defined, such as the Strawberry Fields, is a delight. Seeing your party fuse and seeing said fusions in all their glory is a ton of fun, and really shows off how the developers enjoyed incorporating the mythology of the series into the game itself. Sound, on the other hand, sticks very close to the show on all fronts. The music sounds as if it was ripped right out of the cartoon. The battle music in particular is fantastic. Beach City's soundtrack has a nice bouncy allure to it, while later levels are sinister and foreboding, giving the player the same sort of feeling that the show accomplishes quite well. There's a handful of fully voiced cutscenes within the game, and the show regulars do a great job. The one very clear standout is the new character created specifically for the game, the antagonist Hessonite. Her voice actress sounds asleep throughout the majority of her performance, and very rarely does her voice match up with how her character is reacting on screen. Not until the end does the voice fit the character, as if a celebrity were making a cameo appearance rather than an experienced voice actor of any sort. Hessonite's voice is the sole blemish on an otherwise fantastic addition to the story. Speaking of which, the story itself isn't anything overly spectacular, but it is pinned by the show's creator, Rebecca Sugar. Going off the last game, Steven and the Crystal Gems have rescued a prism that takes the form of Steven himself. It turns out the prism is actually a weapon, and a homeworld gem called Hessonite returns to claim it. The game looks and plays very similar to the first two Paper Mario titles. Every attack uses the analog stick or buttons to deal extra damage, while also defending to reduce damage from enemies. While technically turn-based, Save the Light mixes things up by having a star gauge. Each character's actions require a set number of star points to perform. Thus, the challenge becomes selecting heavy attacks that cost more star points, using small attacks that cost less, or saving star points as the meter fills and using them all at once. The star system is both a blessing and a curse. Your party consists of Steven and 3 different members, either one of the Crystal Gems, Peridot, Connie, or Greg. As a whole unit, you're pretty overpowered from the get-go. However, since you have to work with the star meter, you can't constantly attack. Enemies, however, can, and they absolutely do. You can increase the speed of the star meter and the amount of stars you begin with slightly, but the change isn't overly significant. There's also the matter of your inventory. You're able to use items to regain health, revive teammates, the usual fare. The most important, though, is adding points to the star meter. The issue there is your inventory has a cooldown timer, depending on what item you choose and the significance or strength of said item. Thus, you can't really stock up on items to abuse throughout fights. Now, with all this being stated, combat is actually pretty engaging. You spend time juggling attacks, defense, and items to get through each one. The only real issue I had was the amount of party members that tag along. The low amount of star points you typically get, a mere 5, means your wiggle room for strategy is fairly low. Thus, when your best actions take 2 or 3 points, you'll be doing a lot of waiting, and worse, having characters that feel a tad useless. That being said, battles do utilize the environment. Mainly if you have an attack that will knock enemies back, you can instantly kill them by knocking them off the battlefield. It's a nice touch that can speed up fights. The best part of any fight throughout the game is the team attacks. Every character can pair up with either a fusion into a brand new gem, or just performing a special attack. These are the absolute highlight of the package. They really showcase where the developers had fun working with pre-existing fusions and finding unique ways to pair characters that either haven't had a fusion yet or simply aren't able to. Team attacks are only possible when the relationship meter between two characters is full. The meter fills throughout the game based on certain actions, typically within battle, but occasionally you're given the option to improve said relationships with Steven, specifically outside of battle. During fights, you're given an option to give kudos between allies if certain conditions are met, like performing perfect blocks or attacks in succession. They're all a real treat for fans of the show, and if there's any real complaint against them, it's that there almost aren't enough bosses or opportunities to use these team attacks without it feeling like massive overkill. The rest of the game is exploring each area, finding keys, using the different gem and human powers to solve puzzles, and find different badges that affect how you play the game. Similar to Paper Mario once again, there's a surprising amount of platforming to be had in Save the Light. There's even environmental hazards that make the platforming more than just a mere distraction too. There are occasional spots where it seems like the 2D sprites on a 3D plane are a little wonky, but overall it works. Some puzzles are no-brainers, while others do take a little thinking to figure out. Trouble is, the puzzles expose Save the Light's biggest issues. The first is changing party members, which is done by locating a warp pad. More often than not, a warp pad isn't exactly close by, so you'll have to wander to the puzzle, realize you need someone like Greg, then need to go all the way back to find one. As if that didn't suck enough, some of these areas are pretty big and somewhat empty. No items and only so many little secrets to find, most of which aren't located in the bigger, more open areas. But the biggest problem, and this is the most noticeable when attempting to backtrack, is the load times. These can last anywhere from 30 seconds to a full minute and really add up when you're just trying to find secret locations or explore more of each area. For what it's worth though, a lot of complaints at the time of release were about saves getting repeatedly bugged and corrupted or constant freezing. While I can safely say there's no worry about losing your save, as I never had any issues with saving or loading, there were a few crashes during my time with the game, and as you can see, there's some areas where unexplained bugs would just happen. The AI seems to get hung up on the background quite a bit, which wouldn't be a big deal, except you have to switch between characters to solve puzzles. Having to leave the area because Garnet is stuck in a wall, then go back, which, like we talked about earlier, is a few good minutes of loading and backtracking, really sucks. The game isn't nearly as buggy as it was when it first launched, but there's a lack of polish around the edges that rears its ugly head enough that you'll notice. Save the Light stumbles, and its stumbles are unfortunately more than a little frequent. If you're a big fan of the show like I am, they're not even remotely enough to detract from the game's experience. Like the series, Save the Light oozes with the same charm and personality that the show does, making it an enjoyable but somewhat turbulent experience. If you're not familiar with Steven Universe, there's still a pretty good turn-based action Paper Mario-esque RPG here. The faults may seem a little more prevalent to you, however, and this won't be the kind of title that gets you all gung-ho into the series either. What's frustrating is that there is a great little game here that I would recommend to everyone, but even with the patches on top, you're going to want to bring your shield and proceed with caution.